Hello authors, I'm Joanne Morrell, children's and young adult fiction writer and author of short nonfiction for authors. Thanks for joining me for the Hybrid Author podcast, sharing interviews from industry professionals to help you forge a career as a hybrid author, both independently and traditionally publishing your books. You can get the show notes for each episode and sign up for your free author pass over at the Hybrid Author website to discover your writing process, get tips on how to publish productively, and get comfortable promoting your books at www.hybridauthor.com.au. Let's crack on with the episode. When he's not shooting marshmallows out of a homemade cannon or hanging out with the local magpie population, Steve's using his 40 years of experience working with children in social and emotional well-being to cultivate and underpin his writing. He blends the elements of heart, hope, humour and help to create children's books that touch and tickle hearts. Wow. Welcome to the Hybrid Author podcast, Steve.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the introduction.
So how is it you came to join the exciting world of writing and publishing?
That is a really top-notch question. I failed English at school, so the fact that I'm here now writing books is a bit of a surprise to me. I've dabbled a lot in writing over the years, done a little bit of self-publishing, even up to 20 or 30 years ago, so I've always been a little bit interested in that. About 6 years ago, I decided to take it up quite seriously. My father passed away and left some money for the grandchildren for their education, and there was some left over. So his children, including myself, got a little bit of money, and I thought I will put that towards my education because I'd never gone formally to university. So I decided to do a diploma of children's writing and publishing. And I signed up to Australian College, and it was an 18-month online course. And that's when I decided to take up writing quite seriously. And since then, I joined Squibby. For those who don't know, that's the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Then the rest is history. So I've been a member of Squibby for 5 or 6 years now.
Fantastic. That's wonderful. So in your bio, it touches on that you've had 40 years experience working with children in social and emotional well-being. How's that helped shape your children's author career?
I think it's shaped it quite amazingly. I'd worked out that I'd spent about 15,000 hours of my life listening to children tell me what's going on in their life. And they're all stories. That's their story. And those stories filled me like a sponge. And I suppose once a sponge gets overfilled, it starts leaking. I had to leak out their stories, not their stories as particular individual stories, but stories that had elements of what was happening in kids' lives coming out in the stories. But I wanted to do that in a way that totally respected their privacy, but also respected their journey, gave a sense of hope to anyone else who may be experiencing that kind of thing. So I've listened to kids talk about anything that goes on in their lives. You imagine it. I've heard it, from their pet chook dying to grandma being sick to mum and dad fighting to dad drunk driving to the really horrific stuff, which includes some of the abuse stuff. And so those stories just sit there ready to be told in a really respectful way.
Yeah, and obviously to be put out to maybe help other children who are going through those same experiences. That's really good. So what are some of the roles you've had that you've acquired these stories that you've been able to speak to children?
I worked with the Anglican Church for many years as the children and youth ministry coordinator. I've also been a chaplain in schools.
Oh, wonderful.
And I've also been the director of a charitable organisation called Nurture Works, which was a social and emotional wellbeing organisation that did a lot of programs and things in schools. So I've dabbled in social and emotional wellbeing. Well, probably not dabbled. I'd probably dived in the deep end and been involved in positive schools and social and emotional wellbeing for most of those 40 years. Probably from the very early days, one of the things I learned to do was to listen to what children were saying and to actually provide some sense of hope to the things that they were talking about. Those experiences led me on to the importance of social and emotional wellbeing.
Fantastic, yeah. So you mentioned that
You currently self-publish, independently publish, and you have some traditional published books. How many books have you currently got, and how many of your titles do you put out yourself and get the help from other publishers?
Wow.
Too many to count.
Look, quite a long time ago, I wrote a couple of books when I was involved in the church, and we self-published those. And that was an interesting experience. The organisation I worked with in 2007, we published a series of 6 books in the Feel Safe, Feel Right series, which were all books that touched on social issues for kids. Totally self-published those. And that experience, I thought I knew what I was doing, and I did. I wish I know now, or then what I know now, because then it would be a whole lot different. But that was a good experience. We were lucky because we received a generous donation from someone who donated some money for us to buy a bus, but we had some left over, so we used that money to publish these books. And they've been quite successful in their own right. They haven't really got into many bookstores, but through our own programs, those books have been quite well received. And a lot of schools have them in their libraries. When I first got published by a traditional publisher, I was picked up kind of serendipitously because I went to a pitch session and I thought I was going to pitch my picture book, but I signed up for a romance novel pitch, which threw me a little bit. And so at the last minute, I let the organisers know that I'd made a mistake. And they said, it doesn't matter because the publisher's thinking of publishing middle grade novels anyway. So I went along, and within a couple of weeks, the publisher contacted me and said, we'd like to publish your first novel. So that was pretty serendipitous. And that was my first encounter with traditional publishing. They were a small publisher, and it was a learning experience for me. I realised I knew more about the publishing industry than I thought I did because of previous self-publishing. So that helped me on that journey to know what to expect. Not long after that, I received my first offer from a slightly bigger publisher, and that was my book Lingley's Lantern, which was my first picture book. And that was going to be a hardback, professionally produced book with Midnight Sun Publishing. And that's when I felt that I'd really, really got somewhere with being published by big publishers. Still yet to find how to get into the really big publishers, the big 4 or the big 5 or what do you call them. And I'm still plugging away at that. I've self-published some books for adults about children, a book about bully proofing and a book about growing hope in children as well. And both of those were self-published, one through Ex Libris, which is a big multinational company. And that was a good experience because their publishing experience was straight down the line. They follow the letter of the law. You put up the cost. They do all the bits and pieces. Once your book's out there, they don't give a hoot about you anymore, though. But they do hound you for the next umpteen years to try and market your book for you. And that's where you can waste a lot of money on marketing. You know, for those who want to go down that kind of line with the big online publishers, just be careful that they're going to hound you and they'll find you. Even if you ask them not to, they will keep finding you. And I keep on getting a call. Where are we?
So they offer professional publishing services to help create it, obviously?
Yeah, they do. It's all there. A lot of it is left up to you. You get the final call on things. Their editing is average. You need to really get a good editor yourself because their editing, they don't do a lot of structural editing. So they'll only just do the full stops and commas and question marks kind of editing, and a bit of grammar. But structural editing, they won't touch that because there's too much involved and that's going to cost them too much. Yeah, I thought the process was an okay kind of process, very similar to traditional publishing process, except for you pay for it. You pay for what you get.
Yeah.
And then you end up with a whole pile of books. If you want more, they cost you more, and then you'll end up with shelves of them. And then you think, damn, now I've got a market.
Did you ever consider the Ingram Spark KDP Select route where you've got to put the files up yourself? Did you look into all these other aspects?
They didn't really exist when I first did the Ex Libris thing,
yep.
While I didn't know about them at that time. Had I known about them, maybe I might have considered them. I won't consider them now because I want to be traditionally published, so that's what I want to spend my time getting into. Having said that, though, I have my next middle grade novel is coming out later this year, and that's hybrid published. So it's kind of halfway. when I say halfway, you still pay for the book to be published. I entered a competition and won 50% off the cost. So it was a bit of a marketing ploy, and the first place got a full traditional contract, and runner-up got 50% off, and I was runner-up. But I think there were more than one runner-up. But I did look into it, and I did my research, and I spoke to the manager or the publisher, and it was a pretty good deal. It was less than half the cost it would have cost me to go down the self-publishing route. They seem to be reputable, and they also have distribution as well through the indie bookstores and through the indie industry.
Who was that by?
Shoreline Publishing Group. They've only been around for probably 2 years now, and they've only just this year started up a children's line, which is Playtime Books, and they look pretty good. I'm really excited and impressed by them. But, when you go down something like a hybrid publishing, you know that there may be some risks involved because you're not entirely sure, but there are also risks involved with traditional publishers as well.
That's right.
Because I've heard some horror stories from people who've gone down traditional publishing lines as well.
Yeah, that's it. So it's just take a gamble, hold your breath.
Yeah, well, the worst thing is you've spent a whole pile of money, but at the end of it, you get a nice book.
Yeah.
And that's my hope, is that the book will be a good quality book and get it out there.
Yep.
And then I've got to do quite a bit of marketing myself. But as I said, they do have a distributor, and the distributor will distribute to all your normal bookshops. So, and there is a chance that I could get ASO as well, which is the Australian Standing Orders. I was really lucky with Maximus, which was my first middle grade novel, because I got standing orders through Le Mans, and that got into over 600 libraries. And with Lingley's Lantern, my standing order was with Scholastic, and that was 1,300 copies of that book that went out to libraries and schools, etc. You don't get a lot of royalties from those because they get massive discounts. The benefit comes in ELR and PLR later on, because in a year or two's time you start getting your payment once you sign up for ELR and PLR.
Can you tell our listeners what that stands for those of us who are maybe not familiar?
ELR stands for Educational Lending Rights, and PLR stands for Public Lending Rights. And I believe ELR is all the school libraries or university libraries, and PLR is all your public libraries. Yep. So every time you've got a copy in a library somewhere, it's kind of like a royalty. I suppose if I was a songwriter, every time my song got played on the radio, I would get a little bit of money from it. It's a bit like this. Every time my book's in the library somewhere, I get a little bit of money from it. And I think for me, it might actually be worth more in the long run than royalties are, because royalties suck, really. Royalties aren't very big at all for authors, unless you're a big-time author and can demand a high percentage. But ELR and PLR do help out.
So those two lending rights, do you have to be registered for that somewhere, or does that come through, you are registered through the traditional publishing to receive those royalties, or?
I wish it was that simple, but you do have to register. It's through a federal government. I can't remember the name of the website, but if you look up ELR, PLR, registration, then it'll take you there, and you just register your book, put your ISBN and other information in, and if you go, apparently you only have to register the book once, and it stays registered for the life of the book.
Is that worldwide, or is that just based in Australia?
That's Australia. We can thank the Gough Whitlam government, I believe, for that initiative.
So what are your tips who would like to put out their own works of writing for your independently published experience? Do you have any tips for authors you would like to share?
Any tips for authors? Hundreds of tips that I'm still trying to learn myself.
Mainly just for the indie publishing route. If they want to do their works themselves, like you said before, you did your research. So is that maybe one of the tips you would share? Make sure you look into the companies that authors are maybe looking at self-publishing their work through.
I would say so. You just need to do your homework and read what's out there. There are plenty of Facebook groups for indie authors. If you join one of those groups, you can listen to other people's stories, and you get a whole variety of interesting stories for what's happened to people. But also find colleagues who are doing it as well, and sit down with them and talk with them about how you've gone about doing it. And if possible, even talk to one of the staff, the publisher or the editor in one of those companies, and drill them with as many questions as you can. I did that, and I got some satisfying answers. I think I had a 30-minute phone call, and I had a list of questions as long as my arm. And every question was answered very well. So I thought, yep, I'm happy with this. I'm going ahead with this one. What the old saying is, buyer beware. You really got to beware. There are also some podcasts, etc., out there that talk a lot about independent publishing and about being self-published and all those kind of things. Just keep on adding to the information. If you want to go down the traditional publishing line, then the important thing is just to keep on sending submissions. And you're going to get rejections unless you somehow magically just land it right in the first place. I often think it's like buying a lotto ticket. Mm-hmm. And every time I send a book off to a publisher, I think, man, there's another lotto ticket. And, you get a whole pile of different kind of rejections. I think probably the biggest tip to any writer is, because you get rejected, it doesn't mean you suck at writing. Sometimes I like to think they just suck at selecting. But I shouldn't really say that about publishers. They just don't know how good my stuff is.
Yeah. So how often do you submit to publishers? Do you have a few works out at one time?
Oh, absolutely. I have over 40 picture books that I've written that are complete. And when I say complete, every second month I'll revisit every book. Just sometimes I change them. Sometimes I think I can't do anything more to this book. And I would I'll probably put it this way, over the last 4 years, I've sent out over 40 books to over 40, probably over 80 different publishers. And I reckon that I've sent out over 400 or 500 submissions.
Wow.
And in that time, I've received two publishing offers. I've had some nibbles. I've had some interest. I've spent a lot of money on pitch sessions and critique sessions with publishers. It's not easy. It's hard work. So you need to be a self-starter. You need to keep on at it. As despondent as you can be when you receive rejections, you need to pick yourself up and just say, right, okay, that book wasn't suitable for that publisher. And I think the important thing is to realize that you are a good writer, and listen to your critique group who are reminding you that you're a good writer. If they're not, your critique group are not telling you you're a good writer, then maybe you need to do a bit of work.
Or dump the critique group. No.
Yeah, well, you just got some nice family friends who can be nice about your book, but to be honest, you need people to critique. That's the whole idea.
That's it. No, that's great. Great advice there. So your traditional publishing experience, how have you've obviously touched on it as well, but with Lingley's Lantern, what was the process that you went through with Midnight Sun? Obviously, you submitted and they did they just let you know right off they were interested and then drew up a contract? How did that unfold?
That's a great question. I like that question because it was a great journey. In June of that year, I had 20 books that I sent off to probably 40 different publishers. So each publisher received at least one submission. 99% of them were via email or online forms. A couple of them were traditionally snail mail, so I had to shove it in an envelope. And Midnight Sun was one of them. And it wasn't until about 6 months later, a week before Christmas, I was driving through Punchbowl in Sydney with my caravan, and I received a phone call from Anna Solding from Midnight Sun saying, we'd like to publish your book. And I just about pulled off the road accidentally, and I said, oh, can I call you back in a few minutes? I had to go and park the car and steady myself. And it was such a wonderful feeling to actually receive that phone call and say, I'd like to publish your book. It took about 2 years, or probably more than 2 years from that moment before it finally came out. And that was a good journey. I really enjoyed that journey. As frustrating as the time lapse was, everything else about the journey was really good. I was fortunate enough to be able to choose my own illustrator because the illustrator they had in mind wasn't available. So I chose an illustrator I'd met at my first Squibbly conference, which was Benjamin Johnson. And he did an absolute superb job of the illustration of the book.
Yeah, he did.
And it was nice to see that process as well. So, yeah, did I answer your question well?
Yeah, no, it did. What about the editing process with Midnight Sun? Was there a lot of back and forths with the editing for that book?
Not really, because a picture book that gets accepted by a publisher shouldn't need very much editing. From what I remember, there were just a couple of little grammar-y kind of things or better ways to say things. And also, once the illustrations came in, then some of the wording changed a little because the illustration picked up some of the stuff that the words were saying or the text was saying. So, and that's quite given. So there wasn't really a lot involved. Probably went back 2 or 3 times. Yeah, there was no big deal. Not like a novel. You know?
Yeah.
I remember with Maximus, I spent 200 hours editing Maximus once it came back from the editor. So that blew me away. My next novel, the editor sent it back and it was about 100 times less than that. So I was only about 2 hours of editing. And I said to the editor, did you do a thorough job of this? And the editor said, structurally, I didn't need to change anything. You'd nailed it. So I'd come a long way from my first novel to my second novel. And what I learned in the editing process in the first novel, I applied in my second novel. And I think I learned more in that process than I did in the diploma course on writing for kids.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because that's theory. You know, when it comes out into practice, that's when you think, now the rubber hits the road.
Well, next book, then you can expect none. Will that be correct? No editing.
Dream on.
I've known you to be, you're an absolute ideas machine, which shows by the sheer variety of the books you produce. How do you come up with the ideas for your books?
I love this question because the answer is really weird.
I would expect nothing less from you.
You know, I used to make a shopping list when I went shopping, but nowadays I just go shopping and I look at all the shelves and I go, yeah, that looks pretty good. I need that. Sometimes I get home and I think, damn, I forgot the main thing that I needed. But ideas are like shopping for me. I'm constantly on the look for things that I can see. So I'm watching stuff all the time that's going on. I'll observe the birds, the magpies in my neighbourhood. Got a book about magpies brewing, but I still haven't got the storyline for it. I've got lots of ideas because I watch the behaviour of magpies and, man, they do some funny things. Often I'll wake up in the middle of the night. I don't know if you do as well or many of the listeners do this. You wake up in the middle of the night and there's this damn random idea that's in your head and you don't know where it come from. And I used to go back to sleep and in the morning I wouldn't remember what it was. So now I have a habit of having my mobile phone right next to me and I can open up notes very quickly. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and have this random idea, I'll just write it down and then try and get back to sleep, which is problematic. And my latest picture book, which came out last week, called Where You Going, is about an echidna who has a bag of marshmallows and he heads off in his rickety old bus. Now the idea for that book came because one night I woke up and all I could picture in my head was an echidna with marshmallows on every one of his spines. And that was the picture I had in my head and I went, what is that about? So I wrote it down and then I just left it there for a while. It just sat in my notes and every note I put in my iPhone, I just put picture book idea or book idea or something like that so that when I think, right, I need to start working on some ideas, I will just do a search to see what ideas I had. Now, every January I do a thing called Story Storm. You may or may not have heard of Story Storm. It comes from, I think, Tara Laser out of the US. The idea is that you come up with 30 ideas in 30 days in January to work on. Now, I've already got the ideas, so I don't want to start working on new ideas. I just always make a list of the 30 ideas that I've collected throughout the year. Well, there's more than 30, but I choose 30 of them. And I develop those ideas during those 30 days. And some of the ideas have no story. Turning the idea into a story is probably the most challenging part of the lot because the idea itself is never a story. The idea may lead to a story, but you've got to find the story in that idea. So the echidna with the bag of marshmallows and sticking mallows on his spines. Great image, great concept. But what's the story? How did it come to be? How did that happen? So when I get an idea, one of the things that I say is, what if this, what if that, what if the echidna was going somewhere with those marshmallows and collecting people on the way, or collecting other creatures on the way? What if some of the creatures did some crazy things? And what if I rhymed some bits and alliterated some bits? And I just kept on doing that. And I do that with a lot of ideas. And sometimes two ideas join together to be the one story, and sometimes one idea splits into two to become two stories. And so that's the kind of stuff I just play around constantly with ideas. I also belong to a writers group here in Bridgetown, and we meet every fortnight, and some of the ideas come out of that because of the writing prompts and challenges we get in there that often are quite random. And I come away from there with ideas because we're kind of forced to write stuff that we not normally write. And that's what I like about that as well. It's quite challenging. So yeah, I think that's my long answer to your short question about ideas.
No, that was fantastic. Thank you for sharing that in such detail. It's great. So would you say your ideas, and that almost sounds like a bit of a process, is that the kind of gateway into your writing process? Would you say you have a writing process? Is there any rituals you perform before sitting down and conducting the act of writing?
That's a question I hate.
Why is it weird again?
Oh, no, because you listen to different professional writers who have these amazing routines and processes, and they get up in the morning and they have to walk a kilometre or 5 kilometres before they write, and then they go to the gym, and then they have 3 coffees before they get started, or something like that. Or there's some routine, or they do 5 minutes of writing exercises. And all those things are fine, but it's really about yourself and what's creative for yourself. I sometimes find that I'm a last-minute writer, or a put it off, and then all of a sudden I get in the zone. When I used to kind of write thinking, okay, I'm going to try and make a 9 to 5 during the week to do writing. So Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, that's when I do all my writing and writing business and everything like that, so that I can live some kind of normal life. That's unrealistic, because sometimes 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon is when I just feel the most creative. And so I'll be sitting there at my computer for the next 3 or 4 hours just writing stuff on a Friday night. And that's it. There are people who talk about planners and pantsers. I'm somewhere between planners, pantsers, and ponderers, and what's the other word I'm looking for? I can't think of it, but you probably know what I'm talking about.
Procrastination.
That's the word, procrastinating.
Yes, I know that one.
Never procrastinating, thinking about what it was. So I do a lot of that, but sometimes I become a little bit despondent because I've got so many books that I'm trying to get out there that I'll spend a lot of time on rewriting the pitches and submissions for those books. And when I'm doing that, I don't have the creative writing part of me going in terms of writing books themselves. So I just go with the flow whenever it's there.
Would you say you write every day, or not really?
I knew you were going to ask that one.
You do something involved with writing every day, not so much the act.
I do something involved. Every day I do something involved with writing. I try to write a little bit, or edit a little bit, or dabble a little bit, or do something every day just to keep me interested, or just to keep it going. But it's different as well, because picture books are way different than writing a novel. When you're writing a novel, I think you really need to have that discipline. You need to get set down to it. And I know that the 3 novels that I've now written, each of those I did have a discipline. Well, my second novel, which is coming out in November, most of that was written on a cruise ship. And I wrote that mostly I was on a cruise from Sydney to Seattle, which was 24 days at sea.
Wow.
And there were 2 legs of 6 days at sea. And a cruise ship is just such a wonderful environment for writing. And I did a lot of that. I got into a good routine where I'd spend a lot of the day writing. And my third novel, I have friends in Pittsburgh, and I went to visit them and spent a month with them, but they were working during the day. So at night time, we'd have a ball. We'd be going off, and weekends we'd be going off for a beer. But during the day, I thought, well, I've seen most of Pittsburgh, so I'm just going to concentrate on finishing my third novel. And I got into a routine during those, and I would work most of the day. I think I would write probably anywhere between 1,000 and 8,000 words a day.
Wow.
Depending on how I was going and how much research I needed to do. And I came away after that month having completed, I'd already kind of half written it, but I'd completed the novel. And I felt that was a really good achievement because I disciplined myself to write it. But the other thing about a novel too is once you really get into it, it's not hard work. It's such a joy to write a story where you know it's going to go. So I'd had some plans about the chapters and what each chapter was going to do. And by the end of it, I was really satisfied because I'd reached the end. I'd reached the journey. And it was such a great journey.
These novels, were these the ones for parents about the bullying for the kids, or are these different ones?
This is the middle grade. So my first middle grade novel, Maximus, was only 25,000 words, which is on the lower end. And I didn't know if I had 25,000 words in me. But when I thought of the second novel, I thought, wow, can I find another 25,000 words? But I ended up writing 45,000 words, which I was really pleased with that. And I thought, I've got enough words in me to do that. And I didn't even realize that I had a third novel waiting inside me as well. So I wrote that, and that was another 45,000 words. So, but as I said, once you get into the story and you're really into the characters and really into the depths of the whole plot, you just find yourself getting immersed and you want to write it, finish it. It's good.
Yeah. So are these are like a Maximus trilogy, or are they going to be standalone, separate middle grade books?
Now I love that question, because when I first wrote Maximus, I never set out to write a middle grade novel in the first place. But when I did the online diploma, I had to write the first chapter of a middle grade novel, and I just wanted to write picture books. So I set about writing this chapter, and I wrote 1,000 words, and then I realized I was only meant to write 500. So I sent it off for assessment, and I said chapter 1A and chapter 1B, and I received the assessment back. And then because I'd written those two chapters, I thought, I need to finish this story. So that's what I set out to do. And once I'd finished it, I surprised myself that I could actually write a full-length novel. The second novel, the idea was the same characters as the first story. So when I approached one of the big publishers, they said to me, we like your novel, but because you're not well enough known, it would be a quiet book as a standalone. If you come up with a series, we might be interested in it. So I wrote the second novel, but by the time I'd finished the second novel, I'd already had a publishing offer on the first one. And then I had a dilemma. Do I accept the publishing offer, or do I totally finish the second one and go back to the original publisher? Which I did. I went back to the original publisher, and they said to me, take the one that you're being offered. And so I did that. But then I had a sequel. And then that publisher who published my first one didn't want to publish my second one. So then I was stuck with a problem, because I had a sequel to the first one, and no other publishers wanted to touch a sequel when the first one was published by a different publisher. So I had to rewrite it as a standalone, which wasn't that hard. I just had to do a little bit more introduction in places. And that's the book that's coming out this year. It's called 1,000 Snapshots. And when the editor edited, she said, I had no idea there was another book in it. It's standalone really, really well. But it's also part of the series, because people who read the first book would know the characters already. And so it's true to those characters. And then the third book is the same again. It's standalone, but it's the same characters. So it's not a trilogy. 3 books with the same characters in the same setting in the same year. So if you call it a series, I'd call it the Bayside Blues series.
Yeah, I like that. No, I like that they're all standalone with the same characters. I think that's great. So do you have tips for aspiring children's authors? What are your tips when it comes for writing for children?
1, no children, as in KNOW.
Yeah.
You've got to know your audience. And I was fortunate enough to spend most of my life working with kids, so I got a real idea of what kids like and what kids are thinking. And I've read lots of stories to kids over time in programs and stuff that I've done with kids. And so I know when kids are switched on and when they're not switched on, and I know what kind of stories that they yawn to and some stories that they cheer to. And so that gave me a bit of an idea. But some of the hints for kids, probably for writing for kids, get yourself a good critique group, because you need colleagues, you need a team to cheer you on. And a critique group, while they will critique your work, they'll also be your close-knit group of supporters, because they'll be the ones who will always turn up to your book launches. They'll be the ones who will cheer you on when you finally publish something.
Do you recommend the critique group to be a group of other writers who write in the same genre, rather than being sort of with other people who write in different genres? Do you think it matters?
I think so. Most people who write children's books write in a variety of genres as well, that I've discovered. So someone who writes picture books doesn't just write picture books. They will write middle grade and they'll write chapter books as well. So they've got a bit of variety. I think if you've got someone who writes for adults only, who's trying to critique children's books, and they don't know much about the children's book industry, there's a few issues with that. So their critiquing has some value in it, but sometimes they miss the mark because they don't know children's writing or children's stories very well. An example of that is that I had someone critique something recently, and I put an illustrator note in the children's book, and their comment was, "Oh, you should rewrite that bit because you shouldn't really have anything in brackets in a story." And so I put it back to the person saying, "That's an actually illustrated note," and his comment back was, "Oh, right, I didn't know that. I didn't realize these things." And so that's just one of those kind of things. But get a good critique group, and get a variety of people, from people who are just starting out, and hopefully have people in there who've got some experience. Because if you're all in a critique group and you're all just starting out, you don't have that depth. You've got to find someone who's prepared to come and journey with you. And that may not be easy to do, because that means some people have to take a step in that direction to help and support. And I'm certainly open to do that, because I know the help and support that I've got along the way. So I want to do that to any critique group that I'm part of. Another tip is, when you're doing, especially writing longer stories and novels, is to get an editor before you publish, or before you send it to publishers. An editor who could help look at the structural editing as well as the grammar is really helpful too. What other tips? I did write some things. Learn the craft. Do some courses, whatever courses you can have. Join Squibby, have a critique group, get known. Because what I've discovered in the children's book industry, it's not your books that are going to become famous, it's you that's going to become famous. So you've got to learn how to market yourself, not just your books. And that's a scary one. And someone put it to me once, and they said, "Can you name one of Stephen King's books?" And I went, "No, but I know who Stephen King is." So, and their point was, Stephen King markets himself very well. You'll notice the big time authors, their books, their titles of the story are tiny compared to the name of the person on the book. And so really, you've got to be the product. You've got to be able to market yourself. And I found that really difficult at the beginning, because I don't know whether I had a sense of humility or whatever, or where I was just ignorant or anything. But I thought, how do I sell myself? You know, I've got to like myself. I've got to be convinced that I'm good enough to be able to market myself. Otherwise, I'll be telling people lies. And so I had to become better at it, and then be confident enough to say, yeah, I can do this, and then market myself. So then you've got to write your own bio, because no one else will write your bio for you. And it's all a bit cheesy in a way, but you got to do it. And then get yourself a good mugshot as well.
That's it.
Mugshot. And one other final tip: be patient, because it takes a damn long time to get there. It just doesn't happen overnight. I get a bit cross when I see people where it does happen overnight, and I think, you lucky buggers. And it's like buying a lotto ticket. You go out there, and some people can be same numbers for 50 years, and other people can go out and buy their first lotto ticket and win. You kind of think, well, hang on, that's not fair. But that's just the way it is.
Yeah, that's fantastic tips. Thank you so much. That's great. Good, really good points there. So I see you on social media and you put yourself out there. How is it you hear about opportunities that are open to writers and authors to promote themselves and their work? Like, I know in the past you put yourself forward for judging panels and various things. And is it all just a social media place that you can?
Yeah. Your social media is a necessary evil. You've got to scroll through a whole lot of crap to get to the good stuff. I wish there was some kind of filter that just said, just give me the good stuff. I sign up to things that I think are going to give me good information. So there are a lot of groups you can sign up to on Facebook that you can find out info. But being a member of Squibby, being a member of Writing WA, being a member of the Children's Book Council of Australia, they're three agencies or three organisations that feed out to their members a lot of really valuable information. And I think it's essential that you join those three. And can I add a fourth one, which is the Australian Society of Authors as well, because all of those should be enough, because they do enough work, really good work, in sending out to authors information. If I can add a few other little private ones, I would add Buzzwords magazines. Buzzwords is probably the most comprehensive that comes out every fortnight, that just gives you a heads up on what's happening in the writing industry. And often you find out about competitions and submissions, etc., through that. But just keep your eyes open. And the other thing is having colleagues who are always forwarding stuff as well. So following others on social media means that you get their feed, and there are people out there who are feeding stuff all the time when they get the information and you find out that information. So I think that's probably the best way to answer that.
No,
be seen.
Yes.
Be seen to be seen.
No, there's some fabulous organisations, and especially being an author, and in Australia, those are the ones you should be definitely a member of or keeping your eye on. So you conduct yourself at author talks and school visits and in libraries and at festivals, and you are very outgoing with your various hats and in your performances. Can you share with our authors any tips on giving an engaging performance, especially to young kids as well?
I think probably three main things. When you're with kids, you need to chill out because they are probably as nervous as you might be. So just chill with them and just enjoy their company. The second one is to relate to them, and so stuff that they're interested, that they get. So don't try and peddle your own information. Find where they're at and relate. As simple as getting down to their eye level, so that you're looking at them eye to eye is really important. It's getting a bit hard for me now because I've got a bad back bending over, but I'll do it. The sacrifices you have to make. And the third thing is fun. Just inject some fun into it. And I see that with all my colleagues, and whenever they put on something, the ones that make the kids, the ones that make them laugh out loud have got them. You've got the kids. You make them laugh out loud. But if you make them laugh out loud only, that may not be enough, because you may be just patronising them. You may be taking advantage of their laughter. So I think it's really important that you help them have that moment, that where their emotional roller coaster gets taken on a good ride, so they're not just all laughing the whole time. And change it up, improvise, make things happen. Allow kids to write some of the agenda as well. So if kids do something in it, go with it, because kids can really entertain incredibly well, and let them take over the show if you want it to be successful in that way. One of the things that grinds me, though, is when I see people patronising children. I just get a bit upset when I see kids being taken advantage of in those kinds of shows and programs where the kids get, it's hard to explain, but when the presenter uses a child in a way for their own advantage rather than for the benefit of the child. A simple example like that, if a child comes up the front of the stage and, you ask the kid, what's their name? And the kid goes, Dennis. And you go, Dennis the Menace. Straight away, you may have lost that child, but you may have lost a whole lot of other kids in the process of that, because I think that might be just a bit disrespectful to that child. So I try never to put down a kid or say something condescending to a child in an audience or in front of an audience as well.
So be respectful. Respectful to the kids. Yep.
And kids will see that. They'll notice that. They pick up if you're respectful or not. I think that's it. Be colourful. And if you're bald,
Yeah, that's it. That's wonderful. Can you tell us a bit about the Buzz Build-Up Zone? What is this, and how does it tie into your overall body of work?
Yeah, I saw that question on your list of questions. And I thought, that's another whole interview.
Yeah, I saw it on your website and I was like, what is that? It sounds great.
One of the things that I did was to listen to what children were saying, and I really wanted to respect what their journey was. And one of the things that kids were talking about was their own sense of grief in their life. So they were struggling with emotions generally. And most of the time children would come and talk to me. It's because something was going wrong in their relationships with their friends. But that was only the after effects of something else going wrong at home. So generally what would happen is that something would happen in their home life that was a grief issue. And when I say grief issue, I don't just mean someone dying. I mean anything from a friend moving away, to dad having to work away, to mum getting a new job, to a new baby in the house, to anything that's a sense of change or loss in their life is a grief issue for a child. And if they're not supported through that grief issue, it'll affect their social confidence. And that'll affect, in turn, their friendships. And so children whose social confidence gets a kick in the guts will be vulnerable to bullying. Or they actually may turn into the instigators of bullying because they're trying to regain a sense of power in their lives. So, I get a bit annoyed when I see kids' books about bullying that passed as a bully, as a bad person that picks on you, because the reality is a bully is not a bad person. A bully is a person who's going through a bad time. And I want that to come out in what I'm writing. With the Buzz stuff that I did, I remember working at a school and they had a sign in their undercover area. It was like the old Ghostbusters sign, the red circle with the cross through it. And it just said, no bullying. And I thought, oh, yeah, that's cool. I don't want to see bullying in the school. But a parent came to the principal and said, is there a bullying problem in the school? And the principal said, no, not really. What makes you think that? And the parent said, well, that sign that you've got that says no bullying tells me that you've got a bullying problem and you're trying to stop it. And she would hit the nail on the head. The principal and I had a conversation about that. And we realized that she said the sign was a negative sign. The sign was sending the wrong message. The sign was saying, we've got a problem and we're doing something to fix it. But what was also interesting, at the time, the schools had what they called a bully survey. So they were surveying the incidences of bullying to try and stop bullying. And what ended up happening is that every year, it never got any better. They had the same level of bullying. Sometimes it got worse. No matter what programs or whatever they tried, things just didn't work. And then it occurred to both the principal and myself that maybe we had the wrong end of the stick. If you approach from the punitive end of the stick, if you approach from trying to prevent or stop something happening by being negative about it, you're not going to get there. We came up with this idea of changing things to become positive. And I suggested that instead of a bully-free zone, what's that turned on its head? And it's a build-up zone. So the whole idea of build-up zone then became the acronym BUZ, which was Buzz. Then that became the B as our mascot. And the whole concept of creating an environment that was conducive to children having good social and emotional skills, a friendly environment, and an environment that had what I call the 5 nutrients of social and emotional well-being. So that was born out of that experience. And we then turned the bullying survey, we threw that out the window and had a friendship survey. So we were interviewing children or getting children to fill in questionnaires about friendship skills, about positive skills. So instead of asking how many times has someone hit you this week, we would ask how many times has someone said thank you to you this week, or how many times has someone invited you to play. And what was happening is that the language was changing. The language of the kids was changing. Instead of walking away from a conflict, they were actually staying there to help resolve the conflict. Instead of calling someone a bully, they were actually seeing somebody as somebody who needed support or help through a tough time. And that's where the whole idea of Buzz or build-up zone came from. It's creating an environment that helped children to be able to grow socially and emotionally. And so that it just grew from there. And then a whole organization grew out of that. And we called the organization NurtureWorks, which I became the founding director of the organization. And it grew so much so that we ended at one stage, we had 9 people on the staff. Youth Care, which is the agency that puts chaplains into schools throughout the whole of Western Australia, took our programs on board, and we became the trainers of chaplains to run those programs in schools as social and emotional wellbeing programs, because they were in a good position to do that, and that was taken up really well. So from that real humble little beginning of that parent seeing that sign, plus my own experience of listening to children, we created this whole organisation. I was humbled and also quite excited when I received an Australia of the Year. What did I receive? Order of Australia medal. Can't remember what it was now.
Wow.
Because I got nominated for so many different things. And that just blew me away that it had reached that kind of level and it was accepted at that level. And all of that experience I now want to put into my writing. So as I said, got another half an hour. I'll do a whole stuff and
Oh yeah, that is amazing. I absolutely love that, and I can really connect with that story as having young children and kind of being in those experiences now that our school's kind of adopting, like we have buddy benches and they're bringing the older kids in to be buddies for the younger kids, and they're doing lots of little friendship courses here and there, and school's completely different place since I was at school, but it's just amazing.
Yeah, over the time, it was over 20 years ago when Buzz first started. And when it first started, schools were fairly negative and punitive in their approach to social emotional wellbeing. I remember at the time their discipline stuff was called BMAD, which was behaviour and discipline, BMAD, behaviour management and discipline. And so their whole way of approaching social skills was to punish the bad behaviour and to stop kids from being mean to other kids by punishing the behaviour. And the reality was that some of those kids still hadn't learned the skills. So imagine punishing your own child because they're not holding a fork properly. Or imagine punishing a child because they hadn't learned a skill yet. You don't punish someone who hasn't learnt those skills. You teach them the skills. And those skills, it's so important. You teach them in a positive environment. And therefore, punishment is not effective or is not even appropriate at all anymore. And I've seen a shift over that time. And a lot of that shift is to do with the positive schools movement and the work of Helen Street and her book on contextual wellbeing in schools. And also, there's a whole plethora of others as well, but her and Neil, her partner's work and the work that they've been doing throughout Australia in the schools movement has been absolutely incredible. And the whole social and emotional learning community throughout the world has also helped out with that. I still think we've got a long way to go from what I've seen over the years, but I've seen some really positive changes in that, and I'd love to see more.
Yeah, it's
so now's my time to write the kids' book.
Well, that's such important topics that you're touching on there, and I'm really glad that you're, formatting them into your books and spreading the word that way. So can you tell us where people can find you and your work in store and online?
Well, just Google Steve Heron and my mugshot will come up. I know that when I Google, it's on the top of my list on my Google page, but that's probably because I do it too often. I've got a website, which is just steveheron.com, and everything's on there, and all the links to my social media is on there, and you can find all that kind of stuff. Most of my books are available in bookshops if you place an order, if they're not on the shelves. Lingley's Lanterns should be on the shelves in most bookshops, and my latest book, Where You Going, is on the way to the shelves at the moment, but you can order it through my website, or you can order it through Wild Eyed Press website as well. Where else can you find me? Hopefully find me in libraries and schools doing lots of workshops and presentations, etc., because I've got some good ones lined up. That information is also on my website.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time and your expertise and advice, Steve. That's just been absolutely incredible.
Could I just say one more thing?
Of course.
I haven't mentioned his name, but my latest picture book, which is called Where You're Going, the illustrator, Maddie Mitchell,
yes,
from here in WA, and it would be amiss if I did not mention how impressed I was with his illustrations for that book. He's taken Australian creatures to a whole new level with his illustrations, and I'm looking forward to seeing him get some accolade for that.
Yeah. The illustrations in the book as a whole is absolutely beautiful. So well done to you both. And I can't wait to get my copy.
Yeah, and if your school or library hasn't had me yet, then you missed me out.
That's it, getting folks book weeks on the horizon.
I can't wait to shoot my marshmallow cannon in those places.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thanks again, Steve.
Much appreciated. Thanks, Joe.
That's the end for now, authors. I hope you're further forward in your author adventure after listening, and I hope you'll listen next time. Remember to head on over to the Hybrid Author website at www.hybridauthor.com.au to get your free author pass. It's bye for now.